Welcome to Second City Liberty, a Chicago-centric podcast that takes a look at politics, current events, sports, and pop culture through the lens of liberty. I'm your host, Jim Hume. Thanks for tuning in. Over the past half decade or so, a number of state, county, and municipal governments have passed ordinances and resolutions decriminalizing psychedelic compounds and ethnogenic plants. Denver, Colorado was one of the first to decriminalize psilocybin mushrooms in 2019, and since then, other localities have followed suit. Ann Arbor, Michigan, Oakland, California, Santa Cruz, California, to name a few. There are also more medical studies that have been done that show that these substances offer benefits to those suffering from disorders such as PTSD and depression. There is currently legislation working its way through Springfield that addresses the decriminalization issue, but as of now, these substances are still illegal in the state of Illinois. My guest today is Evanston City Councilman Devon Reid. Councilman Reid recently attempted to pass a decriminalization resolution in the Chicago suburb. Devon, welcome, Councilman Reid. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me to discuss this decriminalization issue.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here with you.
Great, I appreciate it. Hey, maybe tell me a little bit about the resolution or the ordinance that you were kind of putting together. What exactly it would entail, and then kind of what the result of that was.
Yeah, certainly. So the measure was to, unfortunately, in Illinois, mere possession of any amount of psilocybin or many of ayahuasca, many of these entheogenic plants, any possession of any amount is a felony. And in the state of Illinois, we as a municipality don't have the ability to regulate a felony. We cannot remove the felony from the state code, but what we can do is instruct our police department to make enforcement of that penalty the lowest priority. That's what Ann Arbor, Michigan did. And we can also create an alternative charge at the local level that would not be a felony and could be adjudicated in a non-criminal way. And so really this measure moving forward with decriminalizing psilocybin, the point there was to start to pave the way for decriminalization of other controlled substances, because we know that the war on drugs has not been a success, and we need to start treating addiction as a public health issue and not a criminal issue.
Yeah, definitely, and especially a lot of these substances, psilocybin, ketamine, MDMA, a lot of these have shown a lot of promise in treating mental disorders,
PTSD. Yeah.
A lot of these things have been useful, and research becomes hard to when these things are still on the schedule. There, they become harder and harder to do any research with. So that would also be a good step in at least opening up the ability to research some of these chemicals. And I think Northwestern University is a major there in Evanston, and that would certainly open up a lot of opportunities there as well. So my understanding was that the ordinance did not pass the council, but there was some input from the local law enforcement as well.
Yeah, well, it's not over yet. So the measure was for what we call discussion at one of our committees, Human Services. The vote that was taken, there was a vote taken as to whether or not to instruct staff to move forward with preparing an ordinance and doing research on this. So the vote on that was no, but I have been very successful in passing a whole lot of things here, and one no vote does not mean it's over. And we'll, as the chair changes for that committee, I plan to bring this back and move forward with pursuing this.
Great. I think the local chief of police kind of weighed in also and had mentioned that they really weren't arresting people that he could recall for possession of at least psilocybin anyway, that he could even remember. So it seems like that it's probably not even a priority right now, but definitely getting it officially on the books as an ordinance or resolution would
Well, I
would
think that's part of the issue. When I see when I see criminal code provisions that have no charges for particularly for a long period of time, and it's one of those things that we know that people are doing. This isn't the the chicken coop ordinance. There may not be people out there who are illegally storing chickens, but we know folks are using psilocybin and other entheogenic plants in our community. And one thing we do know also is that these substances in particular are not very popular amongst communities that tend to be over policed. And so I would imagine that that potentially part of the reason that we're not encountering it is that given the demographic of who's more likely to use these
Sure.
substances.
No, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense, and it definitely tempers the way any type of discussion is going to lead to, for sure. But great. I mean, it sounds like you're still working on it, and we'll definitely kind of follow that and see how things progress on that front. Excited to see what happens. I know there's some, as I mentioned in the opening, there is some legislation working its way through Springfield that might address the decriminalization of psilocybin anyway. And I think also that would go a long way in allowing some of these municipalities, county governments, local governments to not even have to worry about the issue.
Yeah, because there aren't a lot of municipalities or local units of government that have laws specifically against psilocybin or many of these entheogenic plants. So if the state were to clear it up, it would solve the issue for many folks. And particularly this is at the state level. It's being sponsored by Representative LaShawn Ford, Anastasia Murray, and in fact a representative from our neighboring community in Skokie as well. And so it's it's got seemingly a broad base of support. LaShawn Ford represents the south side of Chicago, portions of the south side. The other folks represent other suburban areas, and the Skokie representative north side. So it seems to have broad-based support, and their focus really is allowing the compassionate use of psilocybin. As you mentioned, there are many therapeutic uses of these entheogenic plants, and we need to start allowing folks to use what whether you're religious or not, what God put here, what is naturally occurring in our environment. To criminalize possession of such a substance, to me, just is antithetical to our American values of freedom.
I agree. That's great. I did also notice, doing a little bit of research as well, that something else that you were working on were some cannabis lounges. Permitting those. I know that's been kind of kicked around here in the city of Chicago as well, but again, still not a reality to be able to allow local businesses to provide this service or this location where folks can enjoy cannabis, which is legal now here in the state of Illinois, in a setting like they would at a bar or a wine bistro. Maybe tell me a little bit about your work in that area as well.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. And while cannabis is legal recreationally here in Illinois, sorry, my phone. We in Evanston and in many communities across Illinois, it is illegal to consume cannabis in public. You can't walk down the street and consume cannabis, unlike a cigarette. We have in Evanston a Clean Air Act, and the state has a Clean Air Act. It's illegal to consume indoors in a non-private space indoors. So you couldn't go to obviously a bar, and we don't want to go back to the days where folks can smoke on planes and other places and harm other folks' health. But and then also separately, many folks can't even smoke in the privacy of their own home because it may be a violation of their lease, They may have a parent that they are a caregiver for, who's elderly and they don't want to consume, smoke near them, or they may have children. And so for some people, there's nowhere that they can legally smoke without jeopardizing their housing or the health and safety of people they care about. And so, my idea was, if we allow legal lounges, we can create a space where folks can go legally, safely consume cannabis products. And the state law is very, clear and strict on this, that consumption lounges must have, pretty state-of-the-art air filtration systems. I would imagine that anybody who would choose to work at a cannabis consumption lounge is someone who either likely consumes cannabis themselves or is very comfortable in that environment. And there are some people who this may be an optimal job for. And, I put forward the measure, and we were unable to move forward with it at this time in the city. There are concerns about, one of my colleagues had recently visited Michigan, and there was a consumption lounge, or maybe a dispensary, and the name of it was Dank House. And that colleague felt uncomfortable with the potential of a dank house opening in Evanston, and felt that it would not be in the character with the city. But the process that I put forward would be a special use where we, the council, would be able to approve cannabis lounges that fit with the character of our community, and created this space where folks could legally consume a substance that we are in Evanston really proud that we are using the cannabis sales tax revenue to support our reparations program.
Right.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, and there are, there are certainly provisions for hookah lounges, cigar bars. These exist, and it honestly wouldn't be a whole lot different. And like you said, if there's proper ventilation and whatnot, it's hard to see why anyone would have an issue. But like anything else, it's a lot of folks that they don't want that. They don't want it in, next door or in their neighborhood. So it starts to lead to these issues. But again, well, keep working on it. I think I think we might start seeing a few localities accept this, and there may be a blueprint to follow in the not too distant future to see how it goes. So
Wheeling has recently passed it, and in fact, there's a new dispensary that's going to be locating in my ward, which I represent the 8th ward of Evanston, which is South Evanston. My ward borders with the city of Chicago at Howard Street. Half the street Chicago, half of it's Evanston, and we have a new dispensary coming to Howard Street on the Evanston side. OK Dispensary, and their location in Wheeling is the first location in Cook County with a consumption lounge connected to it. And Wheeling isn't the most accessible place in the county, but right. Evanston is very accessible. We're right on the border. We connect with the CTA, many bus routes. The sales tax revenue that we could potentially see from allowing these consumption lounges, would I think, in my view, really put the icing on the cake for why we should be this, and why we should be early. Because once Chicago has consumption lounges, no one's going to travel. I mean, very few people are going to take the trek up to Evanston to come. But if we're early on, we can see some good revenue.
No, absolutely. In fact, I'm looking forward to making a trip up to Wheeling, probably. Because I was looking at it like, oh, they have baked goods, they have beverages.
Yes.
It's more than just sitting around smoking. So it really is kind of a new niche industry that I think has a lot of potential. And like you said, you want to be one of the first ones on the block when it comes to that kind of stuff. That really is going to be an advantage. So looking forward to see where things go with that. And then I guess another point to bring up also, as far as legalized gambling in Evanston as well. There was a big controversy here in Chicago with the opening or the building of this casino on the north side. That was a lot of the city council opposed it. A lot of them were in favor of it. It looks like it's going through, but A lot of suburbs also have allow gambling machines in lounges. So maybe tell me a little bit on your approach on that with
Yeah.
Evanston.
So my approach. So to take a quick step back, I did put the gambling issue forward. It was a part of a package of ordinances that I put forward to really focus on lowering the city's legal liability with ordinances that maybe couldn't be enforced equitably and could lead us to costly lawsuits, but also to make sure that we are upholding the freedoms and the values of Evanstonians, and we're allowing and to make sure that we're living up to our current values. And with gambling, the idea that we would criminalize potentially, non-harmful activity. And again, I also think gambling is maybe something that should be treated as more of a health concern, because it is addictive. I have friends and people that I love who have a gambling addiction. They, are spending sometimes the last of their money buying lottery tickets and online gambling. And so it is something that is concerning and that we need to be concerned with, but we don't need to criminalize people for it.
Right.
And so my goal was to remove from our criminal code references to making gambling illegal. And our code is so archaic and antiquated that it, the way it's written now is if, someone on your cell phone, if you were to download DraftKings or, any of those other apps that folks are using now to gamble, the way our ordinance is written, it gives the police department the authorization to confiscate your phone and arrest you. And it's written so, loosely, and now this is far-fetched, but it's written so loosely that if you were playing, if someone were playing, checkers or chess with their child, and they were betting Oreos, for the game, our ordinance would authorize our police department to come in there and bust that up and arrest you and your child. And God forbid, if you were playing multiple rounds and you're keeping score, that would be a new charge. And so to me, that was ridiculous. And then as I put that forward, a number of businesses came forward and said, hey, we're interested in potentially having these gaming machines in our locations. And, this could be a new revenue stream for us. It could be revenue for the city. And while I am not a proponent of gambling, I do think that, this is something that rises to the level of allowing folks to do what they choose and making sure that we're providing the education for people to make the wisest choice for them. But it doesn't need to be criminal, and we don't need to lose out on the potential of, creating a fun activity for folks who choose to engage in it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the days in bars in Chicago that would have machines that paid out that they're totally not legal, but it happened anyway. And talk about so bars selling squares for football games, and like this kind of stuff has been going on forever, kind of under the radar anyway. And it's not like it's going to be opening up new doors to folks that aren't already participating. And like you said, you can download apps on your phone now that allow you to gamble on sporting events and right through your phone. So having this be more accessible, or again decriminalize, taking those statutes off the books that don't automatically make criminals of people for participating in that activity is definitely a step in the right direction when it comes to personal freedoms and liberty.
Yeah, and I'll mention one other thing that was a part of that package of ordinances, and it got a lot of attention last year. A part of that package was looking at our criminal code around public nudity, and our code specifically used both gender binary language, and specifically gave men rights that it did not give to women. And so it was criminalized for a woman to go topless in our community, but not for a man. And biologically, other than the fact that one set of humans has active mammary glands and the other does not, there is no biological difference between the male chest and a female chest. Sure. Other than that, and obviously the tissues that grow there. But and so to criminalize women and for that, and then wherever you fall on the, trans community argument, nonetheless, we have a trans community that exists within our area. And, you know, the way the ordinance is written, could a trans woman go shirtless in public, even though they have a chest that resembles that of a biological woman, but, not a biological woman? And so there's, this confusion that this law creates that treats people unequal. And we've seen in other communities, Fort Collins, Colorado, faced a lawsuit and had to spend over $350,000 defending a lawsuit that they lost in federal court with an ordinance that mirrored ours. Chicago recently had to pay out $25,000 to a trans woman who sued for a similar ordinance violation. And I don't want the Evanston taxpayers to be on the hook for potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars. And, I want to make sure that we are upholding the freedoms and liberties of folks, regardless of their gender, regardless of their, gender ideology or whatever the case may be. And that, we are, truly living in the values of our community. And so that was something that we were able to get passed unanimously, as well as a few other things. And so, I've one of the focuses that I've had in my term is making sure that municipal government isn't doing, particularly our police department, isn't having to do more than what we really require of them. One, because we have a limited police force, limited budget, and we need to allocate that appropriately. But two, we also need to let people be people and live their lives.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The phrase libertarians like to throw around is victimless crimes. These are things that the police force really should not be spending time on, and concentrating on solving violent crimes, preventing violent crimes. That's what makes us all safer. Not these kind of silly ordinances that are kind of on the books as mostly as a mechanism to fine people, as a way of generating income for the police department or the city, and also as a way to a lot of times these statutes and ordinances are used as just ways to add on to other charges that someone could be arrested for. Is just kind of piling on a lot of different charges that prosecutors can use as a way to get pleas from people and that type of thing as well. So the fewer of these kind of ordinances that are on the books, for sure is gonna benefit us all. I don't know if there's any other topics. I know pretty much the only other thing I know about going on up in Evanston is there's talk of the Northwestern University stadium expansion, and how they're wanting to get some zoning laws changed to expand to a more of a sports entertainment complex. I don't know if you have feelings or opinions on that, but let's hear them.
Yeah, I actually am the only council member thus far who has come out openly supporting this project. And it's, philosophically, and who has a philosophy about sports? Well, some people do. But, generally, I'm not a huge fan of sports stadiums in the first place, particularly, with nonprofits holding like the NFL. They're not paying the same property taxes that other entities would. They have these huge parking lots, which, again, the property tax on that is much lower than it would be on something productive for the city. And we just don't want to encourage folks to continue to use cars. And so stadiums in general aren't, something I'm hugely supportive of. But the city of Evanston does not own this land. This is Northwestern's land. We cannot tell them, there's going to be a stadium there one way or another, right? It's their land. That's what they want to do with it. And if there is going to be a stadium there, we should allow them to get the most use and benefit out of that, potentially unproductive land by allowing them to have more concerts, more sporting events, because that'll bring folks into our community, shopping the local businesses, hopefully getting them to park in garages downtown and having Northwestern shuttle them back and forth so they spend some time downtown and spend some money. So this could be a net positive for our community if we allow them the liberty, the freedom to do what they want to do with the space that they own. And, there are people who live near Did I lose you for a second there? I saw the audio cut out.
Yeah, you froze up for a second, but no big deal. You're back now. So yeah, you were saying talking about the folks that live near the stadium.
Yeah. So there are folks who live near the stadium, and their concern is about noise and traffic and a whole host of issues. And it makes sense. We need to try to address those concerns, but also, you freely chose to live next to a stadium, and what do you expect? Right. And so, I'm really supportive. I think Northwestern adds a lot to our community. A lot of folks in our community are rightfully concerned about the contributions that Northwestern makes to the community. This happens in any college town. It's even, I'm sure if Chicago were a smaller city, folks would be concerned about the nonprofit universities there. And, Northwestern, doesn't pay property taxes. So they're not contributing to our schools, and, they're not contributing potentially enough to the city. They give the city $1 million every year, 1.5 recently. But there's been some analysis that maybe they owe, between the city and the school districts, another $8 million annually. And for our school districts, that would make a difference in our ability to educate our children. So I do think Northwestern does have to step up and do a bit more. And hopefully we can use this opportunity to have those discussions. But ultimately, I think it makes sense for us to move forward with allowing, this cultural beacon in our community to continue to operate in a manner that's mutually beneficial.
And they are like one of the top employers in the city of Evanston as well.
Oh, by far, yeah.
So, any expansion is obviously an opportunity for more jobs as well, and things like that in the community. So, well, great. I really appreciate it. If there's anything else that you might be working on or to keep our eye out for up in Evanston.
Yeah, one thing that I think also might be interesting from libertarian perspective. I'm a progressive Democrat. I live and grew up in Evanston, lived in Chicago part of my life, but generally when I look across the spectrum, I think there are values within every ideology that makes sense and that we should be pulling from. And I certainly identify. Some folks have tried to use it as a negative term, but have referred to me as a libertarian or libertarian council member. But I that's not quite how I identify. But I see a lot of the values. And one of the first things that I did when I got into office is Evanston had a history of charging for access to our beaches. As a Chicagoan, that may sound absurd. And as someone who lives, folks who live across the nation, it may sound absurd that a community would charge for access to their lakefront. But Evanston did, and it was born out of a history of initially what I would say is blatant racism, because when it came to be in the 1930s, it was as in a response to the first Black alderman in Evanston calling to desegregate the beaches, and the council said, sure, but we're going to charge access to some. And then it moved from being a directly, racist policy to what I believe today was a classist policy. And I truly believe that racism really just a subsect of classism. And so with that, we created a tiered system where low-income residents were not allowed to see the natural beauty of our lakefront, whereas our more affluent residents could. And we don't charge a small fee. It is $10 a day for the daily pass to go to the Evanston lakefront. And, I thought that was an injustice. And so we worked to change that. My goal was to make it free for everyone, because I think everyone, regardless of your, municipal residency, should be able to enjoy the natural beauty. But we were able to get it done for Evanston residents, and hopefully, down the line, get it done for all folks to be able to enjoy our beautiful lakefront and use it as a tool for economic development, attract folks to our beautiful lakefront, and then have them shop in our downtown. And so I encourage folks, if you happen to be watching, you live in a community where your lakefront is or the ocean front or whatever is charged for access, then maybe work to change that.
Yeah, that sounds great. Again, thanks for coming on. I agree that too, that no matter what part of the political spectrum we're all on, we can find issues that we can kind of form coalitions on and work together. So hopefully we can continue this conversation, or have you back on. I would love to have you come to one of our LP Chicago meetings sometime. We meet up in Lakeview, so we're not too far. and maybe keep us updated as to what's going on up in our neighbors to the north in Evanston.
Certainly. Thank you for having me on. Very nice to meet you.
You too. Thank you.
And thank all of you for joining me. If you're watching on YouTube, click that subscribe button to stay updated on the latest episodes. If you're tuning in through Spotify, iHeartRadio, or your favorite podcast app, click follow to stay in the loop. You can also follow me on Twitter at Second City Liberty. That's the number 2, ND City Liberty. Check out my website, www.secondcityliberty.com. And if you have an idea for the show or a guest that you would like to see appear on the podcast, shoot me an email, jim@secondcityliberty.com. Until next time, stay safe, stay strapped, and stay based.